One metric in the clinical literature predicts long-term mortality more than hypertension, diabetes, or smoking. Most men over 40 have never measured it. They are too busy optimizing inputs, supplements, compounds, morning routines, optimization stacks. But this predictor has never been an input. It is output. How much sustained work can the body actually perform under oxygen demand? Cardiorespiratory fitness is not an athletic stat. It is a system-level readout of how much physiological capacity remains available. After 40, research suggests that capacity drifts downward at roughly 10% per decade in untrained individuals. Most men do not notice because the decline sits below conscious threshold for years. The system does not fail. It quietly becomes more expensive to operate. And by the time a man registers the limitation, the signal has already been drifting for longer than he thinks. Let's look at the mechanism behind this. Cardiorespiratory fitness reflects integrated physiological function across four systems simultaneously: pulmonary gas exchange, cardiac output, vascular oxygen delivery, skeletal muscle oxidative capacity. No single blood marker captures all of that. No supplement modulates it. VO2 max, the gold standard measurement, quantifies the maximum rate at which the body can consume oxygen during graded exercise. It reflects mitochondrial density, capillary perfusion, stroke volume, and ventilatory efficiency, all operating under load at the same time. The epidemiological data on this metric is unusually consistent. Lang and colleagues published an overview of meta-analyses in 2024, pooling over 20.9 million observations from 199 cohort studies. High cardiorespiratory fitness was consistently associated with reduced risk of all-cause mortality and incident chronic disease across nearly every population examined. A dose-response meta-analysis by Hahn and colleagues across 34 cohort studies indicated an inverse, graded relationship between fitness and mortality from cardiovascular disease, cancer, and all causes combined. And in Mansager's 2018 cohort of over 122,000 patients, evidence indicated that low cardiorespiratory fitness was associated with long-term mortality at a level that rivaled or exceeded several traditional risk factors, including hypertension, diabetes, and smoking history. The association scaled continuously, with no observed ceiling, even in elite performers. What that reveals about system architecture is worth noting. A man can have clean blood work, stable weight, and controlled blood pressure and still carry one of the highest modifiable risk signals if his aerobic capacity is low. Low fitness does not just reduce peak output, it compresses the margin between baseline demand and maximum capacity. Stairs pull a higher percentage of total output. A poor night of sleep erodes a larger share of the buffer. A stressful week lands on a system with less headroom to absorb it. When the gap between resting demand and peak capacity narrows, every stressor becomes proportionally more costly. This is the mechanism behind why unfit men over 40 feel like aging accelerates. The biology has not changed speed. The margin has drifted. Now for the intervention layer. The experiment is not to chase a lab score. It is to treat aerobic capacity as load-bearing infrastructure and observe what changes. For a man who has been sedentary or training exclusively with resistance work, the first structural change is increasing sustained low-intensity aerobic volume, not punishment, not a recovery-destroying class. Repeated sustained oxidative work at an intensity where fat oxidation dominates and lactate remains below clearance threshold. In practical terms, that corresponds to Zone 2, an effort where conversation is possible but requires deliberate breathing. Heart rate typically sits between 60 and 70% of maximum, depending on individual physiology. At this intensity, the primary adaptation is mitochondrial. PGC1 alpha signaling drives biogenesis. Capillary density increases around working muscle. The heart adapts to sustain higher stroke volume at lower rates. 3 to 4 sessions per week, 30 to 45 minutes each, represents a defensible starting dose based on the available literature. Once that base stabilizes and recovery tolerance confirms it, layering 1 to 2 higher intensity interval sessions per week can accelerate VO2 max adaptation. But the sequencing matters. High intensity work without an aerobic base creates a system that generates stress faster than it can clear it. Cortisol regulation destabilizes. Recovery architecture degrades. The experiment produces a net cost instead of a net gain. Build the base, then load it. Low aerobic fitness raises the operating cost of every other system. Sleep architecture is harder to maintain when the cardiovascular system is inefficient. Protein synthesis is less effective when oxygen delivery to recovering tissue is limited. Glucose regulation drifts when mitochondrial function is undertrained. Before stacking another supplement or adjusting another variable, the more productive experiment is whether developing the aerobic engine underneath all of it shifts the entire system's baseline. An underpowered system makes every downstream signal less efficient. Aerobic capacity is not one lever among many, it is the platform the other levers sit on. Here is the system interaction to keep in mind. A strong VO2 max does not guarantee preserved muscle mass, stable glucose metabolism, or regulated sleep. But low aerobic fitness reliably increases the cost of maintaining all of them. The interaction with resistance training deserves specific attention. These are not competing adaptations. They load different subsystems. Resistance training preserves lean mass, supports insulin sensitivity through glucose disposal, and maintains bone mineral density. Aerobic training protects vascular compliance, mitochondrial function, and systemic oxygen economy. Removing either one leaves a structural gap in the system. The practical constraint for men over 40 is recovery allocation. Combining both modalities inside a weekly structure demands honest accounting of recovery capacity. 3 moderate aerobic sessions plus 2 to 3 resistance sessions is sustainable for most men with adequate sleep and protein intake. 6 high-intensity sessions of either modality is usually not. Consistency across 12 months will outperform aggression across 12 weeks in nearly every measurable outcome. The failure mode is not insufficient effort. It is effort that exceeds the recovery budget and collapses the training structure within months. Overreaching in aerobic training specifically produces elevated resting cortisol, suppressed immune markers, disrupted slow-wave sleep, and increased soft tissue injury risk. Each of these degrades the very systems the training was meant to stabilize. The engineering principle applies directly: match the load to the capacity of the structure, then expand the structure gradually. After 40, cardiorespiratory fitness is not a performance metric, it is a stability metric. It determines how much biological headroom exists between ordinary demand and system capacity. Most men will spend more time researching compounds than building the aerobic infrastructure that dictates how hard every day actually feels. Aging is signal drift, and one of the clearest signals of that drift is a system that can no longer sustain the work it once absorbed without thinking. That signal is measurable. It is trainable, and most men have never once treated it as a priority.